Our next speaker is George Caffentzis, and George is a co-founder of the Midnight Notes Collective and a coordinator of the Committee for Academic Freedom in Africa, and he's now working with the anti-student loan debt movement. So, go George.
Hey. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to our discussion. We have about 40-45 minutes or so. No, I mean in terms of our whole. So I will basically make sure that we have plenty of time for discussion. I have put together some notes concerning the Occupy movement, and I entitled the notes "In the Desert of Cities" and notes on the Occupy movement in the United States. I'm sure that there has been an experience concerning the Occupy movement here in Vancouver and in Canada, and I look forward to hearing from you all about this experience and seeing if our work in Oakland and other parts of the United States, how it matches up with what's been happening here. I called it in my notes in the Desert of Cities because I've been looking to find some historical analogies to this remarkable movement that sprang into being on September 17th, and the particular aspects of this movement. Nefertiti did a great job to show us why there should be such a movement, but one of the questions we have is why is it a movement of this particular sort? And I'll do my best to try to come up with some answers. And one of the analogies that I began to think about, especially in Maine, there's an Occupy Maine site in the town that I work in Portland, Maine, and every time it snowed or rained or became, the temperature went below freezing, I thought of the people in the Occupy site because although I was a supporter, I didn't take part in the actual occupation of the site. And I said, here is an example of something that shows us through actual physical pain, of dealing with the challenges of physical pain, as an aspect of a commitment, a deep 24-hour political commitment. This affected me as I was lying in bed, and I began to think about what this meant, what was the reality behind it, and what was it expressing. And historically, I remembered that there was a period actually in the history of Christianity where we had such a movement of of people leaving the cities and going to the deserts and accepting a very high level of pain, heat, lack of water, lack of food, in order to clarify their conception of what is necessary in order to be saved. Okay? Now, in fact, this has been carefully studied by many, and one of the most important people who studied it, this phenomenon, is Thomas Merton. And in a beautiful book called The Wisdom of the Desert, he writes, the Coptic hermits who left the world as though escaping from a wreck, and certainly we all are escaping this wreck, did not merely intend to save themselves. They knew that they were helpless to do any good for others as long as they floundered about in the wreckage. But once they got a foothold on solid ground, things were different. Then they had not only the power, but even the obligation to pull the whole world to safety. Okay, I want this to reverberate a little bit about what why the Occupy movement has affected not only us politically, but also emotionally. And I think it's been an important part of this movement, and it's affected us, and certainly me, in a way that I wouldn't have theorized before. Because yes, and I think you did a great job to explain to us why there had to be something like the Occupy to come at this time, in September 17th. I think you did a great job. And in fact, I remembered when we returned after being in Greece and being part of being in Greece at the time of the general strikes this summer, we returned to the United States and said, at the end of August, and said, what's happening in this country? It's like deadline, nothing. And then what we knew had to happen finally did happen. But it did happen in a way that affected us and continues to affect us, I think, even after the repression. This very unprecedented attack on people in the Occupy sites all across this country, with a level of violence that is only seen when the police are out after basically after the homeless. And in fact, one of the most important aspects of the development of the Occupy movement and the response to it by mayors and police officers in the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, this coordinated attack was based upon basically laws that had been set up to hound the homeless. All right? I mean, let's take a typical example of one of them that has been used in LA. In Los Angeles, in the municipal code, section 4118D reads the following: no person shall sit, lie, or sleep in or upon any street, sidewalk, or other public way. Okay? Now that is that's an example of the kind of laws that are being used to unleash a level of violence that is unprecedented from a movement that has not lifted a finger against the police. Okay, now I'd like to speak a bit about this movement, and to speak in as frank a way as possible, because I think that, as Nefertiti importantly said, we're going into a new phase of this movement. And we've learned a lot in the last few months since September 17th. At least, I think, in the United States, and I'm looking forward to hearing what we have learned here in Canada and Vancouver. Because one of the things we learned when the police did come in, let's say, in Wall Street, and in other Occupy sites, I can say that in some of these sites, some of the occupiers were, in a sense, not completely unhappy that the police had come. I think I can say that often the sites were sites of tremendous impact upon, of course, the city in which they would be found, but there was a lot of internal tension that was taking place in these Occupy sites, and it's important for us to put the finger on what it was, because this is something I've heard in New York and in Oakland. When I happened to be there, in San Francisco, many occupiers were either ambiguous about or almost relieved by the clearances, that's what I'm calling the police attacks, while many others were bitter about the lack of resolve that went, the lack of resolve of the occupiers in defending a new community in formation. Okay, This is a very important fact. And it's an important fact that has had a very big impact upon the composition, arising out of the composition of the occupied sites all across the country, as far as I can tell. All right? And it's something I want to hear, I know, from you here in Canada. When a right-wing smart aleck wanted to attack the Occupy movement, they often said, either in dignified ways or in snide chants, "Go get a job."
Yeah, insulting.
But let's think about this. It is insulting. It's meant to be insulting, of course. But, you know, lots of insults can be turned around, and we can learn from our insults, right? One of the things that we have to start thinking about is that the issue of the job is very important for everybody in the 99%, okay? And one of the most important things that the Occupy movement posed was the ability to transform political work into a 24-hour, 7 days a week effort. Okay? That's where the get a job thing. How can you have a job, right? It's 24 hours, 7 days a week. You are in a political commitment, and you're playing it out. Okay. Now it's very interesting that when you actually looked at the occupation sites, there would be some people who indeed did have a job, okay, and who had a family and who had a home, and they would show up. Well, actually, people like myself would show up at GAs, so get involved in some of the demonstrations, but then at other times say, no, I've got the job. Okay? But one of the important things to begin to realize in the impact of occupation in occupation sites in Oakland and in New York and in other parts of the country has to do with the fact that many of the people who have regular jobs in the United States cannot fight on their jobs. In fact, we saw that in the Oakland strike. The people who couldn't go on strike were, in fact, the dock workers and the truck drivers. They depended upon the power of the mass energies, the bodies that were coming off the job from the occupied movement. And in fact, those with jobs in the United States, I don't speak for Canada, I don't know, I can't see. But those with jobs, those regular, great old jobs in the United States, you can't fight for those jobs anymore. What happened, for example, in Madison, in Wisconsin, this winter, last winter, the people who were being deprived of their union rights could not go on strike to defend them. Those who defended them were, in fact, often many of those without regular jobs. The students, homeless people, and so on, who in fact flocked to their defense. So actually, it's a very interesting story, what this Occupy site is bringing out, is that, in a way, the Occupy site had two sides to it, if we look at the job as the way of talking about this matter. Those with a regular job were calling on the Occupy movement to support them. Those without the jobs, those homeless students who are overwhelmed with debt, for example, who were staying at the site, were in fact got a job. Their job was in effect to defend the jobs of others. I think it's a very, it struck me as very important to point this out, I think, because what we have to realize is that we're in a very, there is a big crisis, and certainly in the United States, when, in fact, you cannot defend yourself anymore, and at least legally. So I think that this is an issue which at the same time does divide, because in fact, in the Occupy movement, there is a division, because indeed, those who have the regular job who can't defend themselves at the same time cannot be 24 hours, 7 days a week at the Occupy site. And there is a lot of division that arises from this fact. Because when I would show up, for example, to the GA in Portland, I would have to defer to those who are going to be there, for example, and who have to deal with the, let's say, the fact that they can experience frostbite because the temperature went below freezing. I had to defer to them on a number of accounts because, in fact, they were there. So I would like to this deferral at the same time is a very important possibility. Opens up possibilities of division and difficulty in negotiation within. And I know you know what I'm talking about, all right? And I don't know about because I was in Oakland and I heard a lot about what was going on. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, because we have to realize that one of the things that's happening in politics, and maybe just to point out something about the particularity of this Occupy movement and the way, the shape that it's taken. It has to do with the fact that the body and the place have become so important politically. After a period when we were told that all politics now was going on light speed. It was virtual. It was ethereal. It was immaterial. Okay? What actually the Occupy movement has shown us is that in fact it's the body that speaks. Okay? A new body politics is definitely an important aspect of the Occupy movement's attack on the notion of representative politics, for a body politics in earnest. Representative politics is being rejected by millions of us. Let's remember where representative politics comes from. Representation. Your representative, the one who represents you, presents you in order for you to be absent from the political debates and decisions. So actually, what appears to be a politics of presence is really one of absence. Now, for many of us busy, overworked folk, okay, this appears to be a good deal. After all, sitting through long debates and getting trained to go over a political account of government accounts is time-consuming and tedious. But in periods of crisis, when you no longer trust who is presenting you again in your absence, and when you no longer trust the whole apparatus of representation, the need to make your presence felt physically returns. That is, to go back to basics and originally present yourself as a body in motion at a historical juncture. The occupying massive bodies that we've seen in Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Yemen, Greece, and Spain are made up of those who, for good reason, no longer trust any form of representation, whether electoral or not. Okay? The politics of lightning speed of the virtual and the ethereal was all the rage in the postmodern cosmos. But the experience of the last year has shown us that the body and the site or place are politically important, even sine qua nons for any revolutionary transformation. The siege, which was considered the most archaic arrangement of forces, but now it has been revived. Occupation, or occupy, is being used not in the imperialist sense, but in the spatio-temporal sense of the word. And it's beginning to have a political meaning again. Okay. Let me just finish up some of my comments because it's time to talk. Yeah, I think that what has happened has been that this movement is making demands upon us that are only right and proper. It's making a demand on us because the crisis that Nefertiti discussed in such precise terms, when we hear it, is saying, I want you, all of you. And unless we say, no, you can't have any part of us, we will fail. So this is what I think the Occupy movement in its most deepest sense is saying. And with all the divisions and so on that are going to have to be overcome in phase 2 of this movement, and I think Nefertiti is definitely outlining some of that work that's going on in Oakland. And in other sites, we're all working hard on this because I don't know about the ultimate salvation, but political salvation in this period requires this type of work. Okay, so that's it.